these up before. Oh.
Is that on? Punch it.
It's on. I guess we have to call to order first. Y'all are all ready.
Oh, we got call to order.
Okay.
At?
Call to order at, it's exactly 6:30. So I call to order the Planning and Zoning Workshop, February 10th, 6:30 p.m. And our roll call is Vice Chair McLeod,
Here.
Mr. Devaney,
Present.
Mary Paul, absent, Councilmember Villalobos,
Here.
Councilmember Bunker, currently absent. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming to tonight's workshop. My objective was to be able to go over specifically our zoning ordinance. We will not be able to do it in its entirety because it's quite lengthy. However, I've had some highlights, some parts that are things that we deal with more regularly than not, included in your packet. So basically our overall objective is to review that code to achieve an understanding of how the code is written. Probably you've heard me talk about before, you can't really take things out of context. You've got to go up a notch in order to be able to understand. Also to review, like I said, review the codes that we most regularly look at and deal with when residents or future residents call the city wanting to know information about the different zones, what they can and cannot do. Also I did bring some maps with me so that we can get a better visual of, on the map, what those codes look like and where they are located inside our city limits, as well as in relation to our ETJ. So we can just go ahead and get started. I need to find out if this was included. I did request a proposed subdivision checklist.
It's not in there.
See it in there.
You didn't give me that.
I sent it to Carmen, I think.
You got it? You got
Yeah.
a hard copy?
Yeah, if we just have a hard copy, that'd be great.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
How many?
And that's just, I contacted it's been a while back, one of the local surveying engineer groups that we have used, that a resident has used to do their subdivision. Built a good rapport with these folks and just asked the gal that I was dealing with the most if she would just give me a checklist so that when prospective residents or already residents who are wanting to subdivide their property, they would know what to expect. And that's something that I definitely want other council members to be aware of. So, and I thought maybe I might be able to use one of the TVs to go through the actual zoning portions, but first of all, does anyone have any, like I said, this is completely workshop open forum so we can discuss and have questions. Has there been anything on either of your minds in regards to something that you've either seen done that you don't understand, or that maybe a resident has asked you directly?
Thank you. I think my question has always been about that. Is there any updates on the changing the going from the 2012 floodplain maps to the new advisory maps, which
And that's a good question.
As far as I know, it still has not been adopted by Caldwell County.
That is the same information that I have. When it comes to that, that's where city administration and the council, kind of need to put our minds together and
What
say,
would that adoption look like?
it would be a change in the flood map that we have adopted in our ordinances. And the one we have is from 2012.
We don't specify that, do we? Who's got the book? We got a book?
I got it up here.
Do we specify it would be in the building code?
It is.
There's no, but there is.
I could be wrong. There's the flood damage ordinance,
It's
which
where
is
all of our,
156
where like the building codes
or whatever it is.
are listed.
You know, though with Summer Breeze, they did have an attached map for the survey. The survey usually has. I think
The index of 155.
I think the plat usually has the.
I'm in 155 over
the
here.
zoning requirement.
Is it the flood thing at the end of it, all the way to the end? It's the last section in there. Is that the flood? No.
Yeah, I think it's in the actual building.
Well, then it's in the building thing.
Typically it's in the plat, isn't it?
Well,
Survey
so
plat.
here's what's
Property.
happened before, and I've got a plat that it was of question. You know, like you've said a lot of times, you know, I'm not an attorney. However, if it's written in our books, I feel like that's really all legally we can hold
Did you find
someone to. Which is why in years past I've been, you know, kind of adamant we need to update these, because I'm seeing plats be written according to the old code, because we don't have the teeth in our books to say
So it
otherwise.
does
Now,
call for that.
what I do know is that
And any
Austin
revisions.
and San Marcos, collectively between their council and their administration, they have decided we're going with the new code. We're going to go with the new maps. So they've made that decision, be it by vote and decision like that, where even though it's not adopted by the state, they are choosing to err on the side of the new one instead. We haven't made that decision yet.
155.
15307.
153.
Is it in? Well,
It calls for specifically the 2012 in our documents.
because you remember.
Now, does anybody know if there's a document at the county level that's equivalent to that?
I do not know.
I don't
Yeah.
either.
I do know.
The reference is 15307, and yeah, it specifically states the June 19, 2012
That's right.
flood map, but any revision thereto, the question there is whether a interim revision would be applicable, or if you need a final mapping, because I know that's what.
But I think the state's operating on 2014.
The county, I know because I'd called the
We're behind all the curves.
floodplain administrator. I know the county, Caldwell County, as of 6 months ago, has not adopted the new advisory.
And who was that?
What's her name?
Califon, the emergency planning lady?
Oh, she's the floodplain administrator. What's her? Let me look. Oh, I got it somewhere. Casey
Mills?
Mills,
Mills,
that's
that's
her
right.
name. And she told me that they had not, they were, for some reason, there was something tied up in the courts with that. And I also, and for example, because I've been through this when I raised my house, that's why I know so much about it. San Marcos is with the advisory maps, which is based on 2015 flood. It's been adopted. For example, the base flood elevation is 12 inches above the BFE on the 2012. The advisory maps recommended recommended 20 inches above the BFE, and then San Marcos actually added it to 24 inches above the BFE. So they actually went up 4 inches higher. So
we as a planning and zoning in connection with Mr. Steve Ramsey, our city engineer, on all the plats that we have worked on, we have actually implemented and required 24 inches above BFE.
it is
So
24. It is a. it
we
is-
have just done that, even though that's not specifically what our
So you're
ordinance says.
you're beyond what the FEMA maps require.
So we can't hold them,
Yeah.
to
This is
it,
not-
but we can request
We
it.
would, the city recommend.
We recommend it.
Because you remember, I don't want to go too much.
That's all right.
I don't waste your time.
No, it's good.
But remember when we talked about Summer Breeze and I brought up that
Mm-hmm.
they were involved with the 2012 floodplain maps?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's a floodplain area, and that's what I heard. I actually saw the young man.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him at the cafe in the square, and I asked him what went down. And
Okay.
he said they looked at it, and it was a flood issue. It was just
Yeah,
the way that ground's laid out.
There's
they-
1,200 acres that were literally
Yeah.
shedding
The water into that
watershed
creek.
to that space.
So,
it made a big issue.
Back to the original question here of is Caldwell County using the 2012 maps? It looks like we specify the 2012 maps. Don't know where they would specify anything. I guess Casey, we can call her and ask her if there's something like that. I'll do that. But we do know that Matthew Allen has
Right.
gone in there and updated the CAD maps that reflect the newest, the preliminary thing. So when somebody walks in and says, "Where am I?" the visibility we have is tied to the 19 maps. Now, maybe we're
the
we're obviously,
12.
and the 19 one.
The new one,
The new
which
one.
is 24. Is that 24?
No, it doesn't this is just the maps. This
Oh,
is
the
where
map.
the
The flood-
floodways,
floodway.
boundaries are, and the
Gotcha. So that would
floodplain
be-
boundaries.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
we gotta go get to that answered. I agree that we all ought to be playing off the same playbook.
Agreed.
I think that would be the wise
And so
thing.
that's something that we need to put, I was looking on, like for instance, this particular one is a subdivision plat that we did, in December of 18. And it states and this is where we've put it, it states that according to the flood insurance rate map, and it gives the listing of it, and it says June 19, 2012, which is the 100-year floodplain. So that's also the place where it can say that we recommend that the building is to the 24-inch above BFE.
Which would exceed the advisory maps.
Yep. Any more questions about that stuff? And you can see, Jared, that we need to have those updated, and that looks like literally drafting what it needs to read and look like in the actual book, double checking with legal, and then presenting it for us to approve at a meeting.
So the
To
ordinance
adopt.
already includes any revisions thereto for the floodway maps. So it's just a question of whether an advisory map is considered a revision or if it's not. And so that's
The city
possibly
of Austin is going by it.
The advisory maps, actually the new floodplain maps, and in Hayes County, not Caldwell.
Got it.
San Marcos had adopted those advisory, that is a new floodplain requirement.
right. So if we rewrote the code and said the advisory map of 2019 is hereby adopted, and then we'd have to go in and change that every time the map changes.
Correct.
The language there allows for whatever the most current version of the map to be used. It's just a matter of interpretation of whether the advisory notice is a revision or if it's just a draft.
So either way, redo it so
Right.
that the language gives us that latitude.
Okay.
That's the way I.
Because that's a huge deal changer. For example, I don't know about you, Rob, my house is in the floodway now. All my property's in the floodway. Was it before?
Cuts my garage is and a piece of the back of the house is now.
Front of my house is in the floodway. It used to be about back of my deck, but it's moved. I'm in the floodway.
Right,
For
and there's-
example, I won't linger too much
It's
on
okay.
this. Catherine Glaze, my neighbor, built her house to the 2012, so she probably built 12 inches a little higher. Her flood insurance is $14,000 a year because they changed it into the flood. Her house is in the floodway like mine. So that's a big deal if somebody's gonna develop or build anything.
It is. It is.
So,
FEMA buyouts.
not as much as I got in that sucker.
Exactly. Exactly.
I know it sounds like you'd be eligible, right?
It sounds like you'd be eligible for
Yeah.
It'd be high, it'd be,
Super high, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna keep us rolling. And I think
Go
the
ahead.
first place that I'd like for us to look together is in the zoning code table, which should be in your packet.
toward the back.
Well, it's a table, so as in looks like this.
Yeah, there you go, got it.
There's two of them, and one is the,
Development,
right, one is for developing, and then the other one is for
land use, land use.
for the actual use of the property. And the one I want to look at is the first one that's in your packet. So one thing that I feel like is important is in just above the, where it begins with the land use table. In there it talks about, in D, the zoning administrator may interpret a new and unlisted use as one of the listed uses in the use table. The unlisted use should possess characteristics similar to the listed use. Such an interpretation will not require an amendment of the use table. That's important to know, Jared. However, the zoning administrator will maintain a written record of all interpretations made under this provision. If the zoning administrator declines to interpret a new and unlisted use in a listed use, the administrator will ask the commission to make a recommendation to the council on placement of the new use in the use table, and the council will consider an amendment to the use table to incorporate the new use. So basically what that means, I'll draw your attention to right there on that very first part where it talks about residential uses. So in the second one, which is single family attached, if you go over to under R1, single family attached, there's nothing in that box. But if we have a situation where that is being requested, then the zoning administrator, be it myself or actual administration, has the ability to say, well, you know what, the location where that is on the map, everything around it is the same, therefore we're going to go ahead and grant it.
Huh? Whoa.
As in,
I don't read it
single
that way.
family attached
I think
can be in R1. I mean, I'm reading the actual.
I think it's if it's not envisioned currently. So single family attached is already listed
in the table.
in the table, but if there was a mixed use attached, to make up some
Okay.
made up term, then if that term was not already included in here,
Okay.
then that would be.
This is-
Or if there was a distinct design process that crossed between a duplex and a single family attached, and you're trying to draw a distinction there of some kind, then I think that's where you're talking about.
And this is where I'm going to go ahead and back up, like I've said times before, taking things out of context, which I guess is what I just did. So the use table, that it's intended for reference only and does not necessarily reflect all the regulations. I'm paraphrasing and skimming down here. If a conflict occurs between the use table and regulations, it says that on certain chapters, the text of the individual district regulation shall control. What we need to be clear about is on this actual use table where you see the letters P, S, N, and I don't think we have any C's in here, but that could be. So P stands for permitted by right. Uses identified with P are permitted by right and shall be permitted in the corresponding district subject to all other applicable standards of this chapter and code requirements. If there's an S, it stands for are allowed in the corresponding district only with the approval of a specific use permit. If there's an N, and I'm seeing if we actually have any N's. On salvage yard, on the last portion of it, it says not permitted.
Not permitted, or
So
a pig
not,
farm or something.
not permitted, use not identified in a particular district column are not allowed in the district. And then CONDS, which stands for conditions, the final column of the use table contains references to supplementary and standard applicable to a use in one or more districts. The reference standards appear gives the chapter 155.097 below pertaining to supplementary use standards. So I just want to make sure, and I'm very much wanting you guys to weigh in on if my interpretation of this table is different than yours, then that's a problem.
I don't see how you can interpret it different.
So then
Let's take one
Yeah.
that we've all
dealt,
argued with. What are we doing with RVs? You know, there is no RV
well,
out here.
that's just it.
RV on there.
So what? So your point earlier was if it's not on there, which one of these rows does it really come closest to? So is it? It's not a manufactured home. I think we decided
Correct.
that was about it. It's not an industrial modular home. That's a hard definition. It's not a guest house. Maybe it is a guest house. I don't know. So what, so people having RVs at their house, if they park it, it's okay, because that's just like anything else that you park that you
I thought we
own.
had
You can put a boat,
recreational.
you could do this boat.
I thought there was a recreation.
But we ought to have a line on here as to how we're gonna rule on RVs.
What did you say, Sylvia?
I think there is a recreation.
There is a recreational vehicle on here.
I think it's down under,
I said campground.
yeah, that's the closest I come to it. These are in
That's a-
alphabetical order, right?
Not, it's not in the residential use
There is.
for sure.
Where you see it.
No, it is not.
Correct.
It's not in the
Residential uses.
So one change that I think is since everybody constantly griping about these things, we need to add a row that says RV, and then
I
we just, and decide what we're gonna do with,
Good point.
where we're gonna allow this.
I agree.
And what it would look like. I know that when we redid this back in, when I was involved in, 08, and some of these were done in 10, there were things that were discussed. And even though in some instances we had lots of foresight, there were instances where there were some folks on the council that it kind of fell in their backyard and they really didn't want to weigh in on it. And so it's kind of like, well, if you just don't put it in there, then we don't have to deal with it. But we all know that that's not the best practice to follow. So.
Do you want to talk about that tonight?
Sure,
Do we put an
yeah.
RV table in there?
Absolutely, I think that is.
Because they were very raised all kind of hell about those RVs across from the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So that's another thing to go on Jared's list of, and that's what we would, ideally want to do would be to go through this entire ordinance and figure out all the things that we do see that are at least screaming in need of change that we would.
If I could just
Please. Yes, ma'am.
chime in. So just to kind of start from the beginning, you and Mike are both in on this, right?
Well, I'm the planning and zoning chair, and then this last year we elected him appointed him as vice chair.
So then, like, as you've been going on, like, how is y'all's role gonna commingle to go through these things? Because you've been in the planning and zoning already for years, right? So then, when was the last time that this was updated?
Oh wow.
2012, that one. So it was
on the bottom.
2012, and that is for the zoning codes, correct?
There might have been an update in 2016.
16, yeah.
And you can tell Sonia.
It's just
On the
from-
bottom of it, at different
At the very
points of each chapter.
Of each chapter, it gives you the last when it was passed.
Okay.
And it doesn't tell us what was changed, but it does
Do
tell us
we
that
want to
something
talk about
was.
an RV slot, well, tonight or not?
Absolutely, that's what this is about, and,
Well, do y'all have any, you know, I mean, I have an RV, but I don't park it there all the time. I park it if I have guests, for example, I have guests there, or I'm getting ready for a trip. So do we wanna have it, do we wanna ban RVs, or do we wanna have it temporary? It's an X amount of time you can have an RV in your
so
yard?
here's some real life situations that have come up. So there's nothing in our ordinance that says that you can have an RV set up, as in have it connected to the wastewater, have it connected to the electricity. I know during one of the floods, we had a family just down the street here that their house was very, very flooded. They were able to acquire an RV that their family literally lived in while they repaired the house. I do know that they were given special permission based on the nature of the entire situation. I can't say that I saw the documents directly to say if there was a 12-month timeline on it or
Well, I lived in mine for 3
18-month,
months,
you know.
so.
So
I
those,
believe we gave them 6 months.
okay.
Uh-huh.
So those kind of things I think are on a as needed basis. However, I feel like we should have something in our ordinance that at least gives us a baseline. And to my knowledge, you know, we just don't have it in our ordinance. And so what do you guys think? Mike, you've shared your thoughts on the fact that we need to deal with it. But what are your thoughts, Sonia, about folks having RVs? There's two different kinds of situations of having an RV. One, you're storing it because you literally use it as a recreational vehicle. You hook it up or you drive it away whenever you go on vacation. Where it's parked, how it is stored, those are the questions. I know that, like I said, back in the beginning of this, there was one council member who had one, and by us talking about it, she just said, well, I'm going to build a building to store it in. And that's what she felt like was important. We never put that in writing, but that was what was done. Some people, that may be cost prohibitive for them to do. I don't know. But that's why I feel like we should.
Well, I personally am not in favor of building, of running them out. I mean, if a person owns them, a boat, an RV, or whatever other, stuff that they want, they can. I think that they have a right to store it on their own property.
I agree.
I'm not one for saying, oh, you got to keep it out of town or whatever. Some places do that.
Some places do that.
But hooking them up and using them
For a dwelling.
for a dwelling,
Or a guest
the
house.
ones I've seen, I think every now and then get hooked up as overflow. Family members come, I need an
That's
extra,
exactly what I
need an extra bedroom for them or whatever. They hook them up for the night and off they go, and they're used for a very short period of time. Personally, I don't have any problem with that either.
I think in that situation, I don't either. I feel like there is and maybe what we need to do is look at other cities and see what they are, and I know I've actually done this before, but look at other cities and see what they are requiring. It seems like in my head, it can't be hooked up for more than 3 weeks. It seems like 3 weeks is in my head. So
It sounds kind of long to me.
it does to me too, but the in-laws come for the summer or, for a few weeks in the summer. Maybe we say for 2 weeks. Maybe we say for 7 days. But that's all something that we need to consider. What do you think, Sonia, about how long it would be hooked up for your own personal overflow, not for you to rent out as a short-term rental? Because that's a whole other thing we need to talk about when it comes to RVs.
Because, they are rented out for short-term rentals.
And that is a thing, and it is happening.
I think that would probably fit under commercial use. And you could address it under the commercial use instead of residential use of that same.
And I feel like with that, I hear where you're going with that. I feel like, the code that we just made changes to with the short-term rental is that if you have 4 or less units, be it bedrooms inside your house or guest houses in the back, do we want to consider a recreational vehicle as a unit?
I think we're in agreement here. What you don't wanna have is somebody setting up an RV permanently on their property and rent it out full-time. I think that's something we probably want to, I don't know if what y'all think about it too.
Unless they went through the entire process of, be it a specific use application that we would look at, say it is inside the city limits, but it's not in the view of, just driving by, you don't necessarily see it.
But then you got the church that volunteered for the people that Barry raised hell about.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing charity work. So you probably want to, if you got, say, heaven forbid we have another flood.
Right.
And volunteers come in with the RVs, we don't want to penalize those people that are coming and trying to help folks out. So there needs to be exceptions to the rule.
And what we required when that situation came about is we required them to obtain a specific use permit, and they already had their schedule laid out. They were going to be here for 12 months, and if they were renewed, they wouldn't know at that time. And so they were given permission on a special situation for that. It did, they weren't told, no, you can't do it. It was just, you can only do it for X amount of time.
Because, I never got a permit, by the way, for that. I stayed in mine for 3 months when I was remodeling my house, I lived in it. Mm-hmm. I lived in the house. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the issue.
Part of me thinks that, knowing RVs in the way that I do, you have tanks on board for your gray and your black water. So to me, if in fact it were connected to our wastewater, you could, if you had it parked near your clean out, in essence you could do that, right? Is that something that can be done literally, physically? Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. In theory,
you could
in
tap
theory
into
you could
it,
tap
I guess.
into it.
I never did. But
To me, that's a line drawer. That's where I would draw a line where they would be connected to that, because then that's using a city service without.
What about the volunteers again? I don't want to keep devil's advocate.
Then that would need to be addressed. That would need to be addressed
Special
in the special
variance or something.
Either that, or because they actually did connect to the wastewater.
Yeah.
They had taps put in.
And that's what you want them to do anyway.
Well, that's what you want in that
It's a
kind of
long-term,
situation to do. But in the situation where, you drive by and you see somebody's got an RV, and it's one thing to see electrical cords go into it. It's another thing to see a waste pipe, clicking down on the ground. That's where it's a game changer, in my opinion.
Right, because in the in-law scenario, likely they're using the facilities inside the residence.
Typically. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that, that we need to address altogether as what that looks like and what that means.
How are you gonna do that?
We literally would have to we should come up with what we would propose, and then
When will you have that proposal ready?
I know,
Why don't we do it right now?
Yeah.
we can. I mean, we totally can.
Do you want to do it right now, or you want to wait until?
Let's do it right now.
Well, I mean,
man.
I'd
Just do it
I'd
quickly.
like everybody.
So everybody go draw them a little continuation out here and tell me what.
Let's do it.
Under R1, is that gonna be a P or an S or a blank?
For it, when we add one of these, that is a RV. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So let me go to the right.
It's not gonna be under development standard. What is it gonna go under? Multifamily dwelling?
Residential uses.
You wanna put it residential, like RV?
Well, that's typically where they are.
I don't know. They have to put it in two places.
Well, what we need to do is, let's see.
Yeah, you put one in commercial use and then one in residential use.
It's the same as what I have.
Or should we have input from it's hard to make it more complicated, but we got two city council people.
Well,
Here.
this is a springboard. That's
Okay.
right.
All right, there you go, Phil.
This is our springboard. So
And then this is just.
Oh, yeah, this is workshop, we're just getting the proposal ready. We can,
I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not.
So you're saying basically, so like just based on this paper that we have at the bottom, like we would come down here underneath the group home
Yeah.
and add recreational vehicles.
And are we gonna allow them in R1s, single-family residential areas, to be set up for a certain time period? And I think what I heard earlier was S would be okay.
So let's cross-reference where we have what currently is in here, which says bed and breakfast, because that's what we are calling or considering a short-term rental. Where is it?
Right there.
Okay, so to me, in each, it would sort of follow suit, maybe, I don't know. So in R1, for a short-term rental, you have to have a specific use permit. So if you were going to set up an RV, would you, I mean, if you're going to use it for that, therein lies, if you're going to use it for a short-term rental, then yes, you still need a specific use permit. Now, I almost feel like we need to have more than one category for RV. You know, RV for, you know, an RV for dash P for personal use, and then RV short-term rental.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. That's probably a good idea. And I'd put the short-term rental over there under the commercial operations.
And then we would also need to add in our definitions, you know, what that really means.
Yep.
Because to me, if you're in R1 and you have an RV, I think it should be permitted for you to have an RV, and we should have it defined that it would not be set up with utilities for more than X amount of time. So what kind of time are we thinking here?
What do most other cities do?
I'd have to look
But
it up.
like you're saying, for an RV to be hooked up without city utilities, that means they're running a cord from somewhere on their property. Is that even safe?
Yeah,
I think
it's totally safe.
No, it depends what you're doing.
Well, it depends on how
With
it
the-
is, but it depends on what size it is. If it's
You gotta
110,
have a 30
220.
But see,
amp
like
service.
to me,
30 amp
it's
or
like
50
we
amp?
are creating things just like on the fly. Like if there's a list that's saying, okay, we need to look at RVs, then put that on the list of stuff that we need to study rather than trying to create something on the fly here, because I don't think that's gonna do anybody any good.
I'm just trying to give us a
But
springboard.
maybe you ought to do what
We're not
other
making
cities
final
do.
decisions.
That's what.
Do a little bit of study on
Yeah.
it. Let's do some research on it. Like I didn't even know RVs was gonna be one of the things we were gonna talk about tonight. I thought we were gonna go through this to learn how to use it.
Well, and we are, and this is
Can I
I
just,
consider
we'll
part
go
of
forward,
it.
we'll just research it further, see
Sure.
what other cities do, and we'll go on, like you say, stay on the program. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cause we could be on
Yeah, we
RVs
could
for
talk about
a
it for the next
while.
hour. Yeah, I
All right.
we want to spend all night here. Okay, I agree.
that's perfectly fine
Okay, let's
with me.
stick with the original.
All right,
Okay.
and so let me.
Does that sound good to you guys?
That works. So let me just, because I did choose, which that was part of the reason that I chose going over the table information first, so that we would all have an understanding of what that looks like, and just making sure that we understand how to read it and what is permitted and what is not. So are there any questions about, any other questions without digging in too deep? Okay, and then so for you to be familiar and understand the difference between the use table that is in chapter 155.096, the one we've been looking at, and the next table, which is, it says D at the top of it, it's property development standards table. So I want to just bring your attention to that table, and what this is, I'm sorry?
What
Okay,
page are you on?
these don't have page
It
numbers.
says chapter
one-
105.
And so what this is for is it talks about when somebody is building or developing. So to just look at it in a single family detached, it says that, and I'm going to use R1 as our example, that we as a city require you to have a half acre in order to build or do anything on a lot in the city limits. It says, I'm going straight down the list, your front yard setbacks must be 25 feet. Your rear yard setbacks are 20 feet. Interior side yard, 6. Street side yard setbacks are 10. One thing, Jared, and I don't know if you can find it, that asterisk that's by the 10, there is nowhere that tells us what that asterisk means that I have found. I am open to having overlooked it. There is a footnote at the end of the table that says, shall conform to existing structures and uses pursuant to 155.081. But we need to figure out what that asterisk means because it's across the board on that particular item. So, anyway, it also talks about the maximum height is 28 feet, which I think is probably your standard 2-story house. Maximum lot coverage is 40%. That has to do with impervious cover. Then in the attached, now see, and my question here is, in this table where it doesn't have anything under R1, how do you interpret that? It says you can't.
There's no restrictions.
No, it's
No,
not.
that's- I
You
don't-
reference the permitted use, and it's not a permitted use in R1. That's why it's blank.
Say that again.
You're talking about the single family attached? Why it's all blank? It's because if you go back to the previous table, it's not a permitted use under R1.
So are you saying that you cannot?
Build, there is no single family attached permitted use within the R1.
How is that? That just
what the-
doesn't make sense to me.
That's what the zoning is.
What's the definition for single
It's the
family?
garage. Is that not
Oh, yeah, it's
correct?
a garage.
It's the garage. Attached and detached is garage. So
That's what attached means.
if I were reading it the way you've just described, you just said that you cannot build a house that has a garage attached to it in R1. Unless-
He's just reading your table, Lisa.
I didn't make the table.
Right, where
Right
is
here.
it? Yeah. It's just blank.
So to me, that's something we need to fix.
There you go.
Because there needs to be a P for permitted in R1 on attached.
Okay.
I thought
We probably ought to put garage on there.
Well, I mean, that's,
The word garage.
So-
that's standard language.
Yes,
That's
that's how they say it. in
that's standard
insurance.
language.
Okay.
what would the
Attached and
townhouse
detached.
count as?
If it has an
Condo.
attached garage, it's,
No,
well,
like if you have a row house.
A row house, yeah.
well, first of all, a
Well,
row
that-
house would fall into,
So I think that might be the difference between
Garden patio home?
attached and detached.
That's what I'm thinking.
it's,
That's how I always understood. I didn't
That's
understand
what-
it. The garage.
Yeah,
Always.
neither.
Are
I
you
was
attached
thought,
to
yeah,
another house or
like a
or
row
not?
house?
A row
Yeah, or a
house.
condo.
Well, look up the definitions.
I'm going to look
They're-
up the
I'm pulling
definition right
Pull
now.
them up there, city manager.
Here they are.
Let his old buddy hear from the citizens here.
They're all watching you on TV.
But yeah, that's right, they're on TV.
All right.
The hell they.
That's right.
So a single family attached is a single family dwelling situated on a separate lot but attached to another dwelling on one or more sides by a party wall or walls.
And
See
where did you
townhouse.
find,
So,
see townhouse. Okay,
This
see, we were
building
looking
is
at it.
attached to Carlton's building. That's attached. Detached.
Right. So if this could be
Yeah.
if this was a dwelling and that was a dwelling, these would
row-
be
like a
single
row-
family.
like a row house.
But
So it's
but
not garages. Let's scratch
So
that.
there we go.
There we
So what that means is that you can't build a duplex in R1.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Because it's on line 3 of that table.
That's probably why it's that
The
way.
distinction likely between a single family resident attached and a
So how many
duplex is just a number, just the number of attached dwellings.
We have some duplexes in town, don't we? Somewhere, something tells me we do. But I'm
Put
trying
it
to.
up, put it down right.
Well, they all
Well,
got torn down. Those that are down there.
Oh, no.
on Lawrenceville Road.
Gordon's got a duplex
Yeah,
down there
that's a duplex, you're right.
in the back. Wonder where that's at.
Is it really a duplex?
Yeah, it is. It is. Been there recently.
I'm gonna pull these out so I can. So we can all.
Now that may be multi-use. It would be right, let's see, there's the street comes in.
Northwest of the road.
See, and this is that pad site that got leveled.
It's permitted use in R4 unless it was grandfathered in.
And so we've never changed that.
Gordon's place is right there in the yellow. So he may have been grandfathered in, those been there longer than we've probably been a city, but, and then
What do you mean those have been there?
those two buildings have been there. Gordon's two little duplex apartments back there. I think they've been there since.
You've been there a long time,
they've been
you're
there a
right.
long time.
I cannot even visualize where we are, but okay.
And this is apartment, that's,
Apartments there, they've been there for years.
yeah, they've been there since the
Well, there's some
70s.
she was in on job.
It says R4, okay.
What's interesting to me that is the single family attached isn't allowed in a mixed use zone.
So it sounds to me like, Mike, you and I need to sit down and fine tooth comb all this and come up with our recommendations to present to the council and then let everybody else weigh in on it.
Aren't there duplexes somewhere down here too?
There used to be, when I got,
Down there by the, yeah, way down
and there
there.
were a couple of them that got torn down.
Torn down,
after
that's
the
what I
flood.
thought this was right here.
No, that's Quail Run, it's down here. I think it's in,
Oh, the ones that flooded out by
yeah,
that, by that
you see the slabs there.
lift station. I think it's
Yeah, they're gone, but I'm not sure there aren't some more in,
R1A.
where, down there by True Lane.
That is correct. That used to be an old veterinarian. So,
And that is, where's True Lane on here?
well, it's gonna
It's
be,
gotta be one right in here somewhere.
this is the Spring River. And so it's just
I think
after.
it's right there.
Yeah,
That's R1 as well, so there's at least a couple of instances that we've obviously never stopped development in a.
Residential.
And one thing that I'll tell you, just bring your, visual to, is that we were told, one thing you want to avoid is what's called spot zoning. So, for example, say that someone right here, which the yellow is R1, and both sides of the property are both R1, but they want to be commercial. This front part of the property is commercial, but then everywhere else is not. So, say if there was a zoning change request for that area, the council or the commission would want to be mindful if in fact there's any other properties that are adjacent to it that you would conform. You don't want to fall into what's non-conforming.
That's a big issue in San Marcos.
That's a big issue in a lot of places, and
Building those duplexes, triplexes in residential areas.
and so that's where having foresight over, and it's hard to do. It's kind of like as soon as you put it on paper, it already is obsolete almost, and the next is coming. So that's just to be considered. All right, so now that we have identified, and thank you, Jared, for confirming the attached and detached situation. Also on the development standards. So this is the stuff that the council or the commission probably won't ever look at or get into. This is the stuff that when an individual or a business or whomever submits building permits, this is where the engineering firm that we have third party hired to look at, this is where they look at it to determine what the requirements are going to be for that new building or.
So one
Quick question I have, multifamily would be, dwellings would be apartments?
apartments and condos.
Okay, okay.
The
And then there's duplex, that's self-explanatory.
one thing that I point out is a half acre is a pretty large parcel when you're looking at single family detached homes or single family homes because it's going to be attached. It's that big. It would. It's great for the people who can afford and own those homes. It does not create a large supply for affordable housing because you're buying a larger plot of land than you would normally buy in typical neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It also would be a barrier to infill development, so basically developing within existing land uses. And so that might be an area, I think it makes sense while it's there, but that might be an area where the Planning and Zoning Commission might want to look at a potential change in either expanding the scope of R1A, which is more of a typical lot size and setback, or readdressing how the R1 is used. Because it is a barrier to development because you're catering to a higher end consumer of that land use, for sure.
But on the flip side, it would kind of keep, let's talk about down the road. You got central, Martindale.
What we call
with
Martindale
the
proper.
large lots, city limits, then your KB and all your other stuff comes around. And that would be probably definitely subdivision type lots.
And those type of setbacks and lot sizes would be addressed within the development, within whether they've got a MUD or whether they've got a PUD or whatever it is, that's where that stuff would come into play. What you're talking about was addressed when we did all of this rezoning back in 08, from 08 to 2010. And that was specifically in this area right here. So here we are downtown. Let me see, where are we? This is 1979. So when we redid everything and really drew the lines, we basically had to go with whatever was literally there. So in this portion, that's what an R2 says that you can have manufactured housing. And then I also will tell you that there have been situations in this area specifically and others where, say that, for example, in R1, if in fact you had a manufactured housing when the zoning got put out, it states in here that it says if you remove that house, that manufactured housing, in R1, you're not allowed to replace it with another one. You have to build a stick house or of such. Well, so then say that lot is only 1/4 of an acre. So that is where a variance, which is on my list of things for us to discuss, that is where a variance comes in. That situation cannot be held to the same standards because they don't have the same pad of ground to do it on, and that's where a variance comes in. When it's something, I tend to look at it as what I call a handicap. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. So that's where the commission would say, we understand you're not going to meet. You're going to actually go into 45% of impervious cover because it's going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and you're going to go over your normal, and your setbacks are not going to be quite the same. So we would allow for that in that situation, or at least it would be reviewed. I shouldn't say we will allow.
Yeah, that was one that we had, the Savannah home. When I started, they came in and they said they were told that they couldn't. And I said, well, what size do you want? And I said, well, that best fit here. He goes, yeah, but they told me they couldn't because I wanted more space. I said, well, let's go up. So they went up.
Yeah.
Two-story home.
Oh, they made it a 2-story instead. Oh, that was smart.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I see why it's there. It's just when you have a lot of vacant land, a half-acre plot size within city limits in R1, and most of the city is R1, is a barrier to development.
And, and that, I guess we would,
And that's could be a good thing or it could be a negative depending on your viewpoint.
I do know that we've been, or at least I have been approached with some potential developers coming in, and they are, there's land in R1, but they're going to be putting together, a planned urban development. They're going to have some kind of mud. They're going to have something that's going to redefine those things that we as a council and we as a commission have the opportunity to say, we either like that or we don't. Here's our standard. So I'm with you with what Mike said as well, kind of protecting at least the, what I call Martindale proper area to remain. There's not a whole lot of vacant lots in that
Yeah, because it's going to
area.
grow, eventually you're going to probably have KB or whatever, and they're going to be small lots.
So then, you had the map out earlier of the subdivision that was over there, across from Jack Mudd's.
Yep.
So with that, is that R1?
It's actually both. There's two.
Okay, so then with them, do they have half-acre lots?
They do.
All of them do.
Because they're skinny and long.
That's right.
All the river.
They go all the way down to the river.
What about the two concrete slabs that are right there, the last two that are for sale?
Those were pre-existing, I believe.
Those don't, I don't think those are half-acre lots.
Yeah, I think they are. I think we
The
checked that.
Let's see.
were the two concrete slabs on?
It
I don't
could,
know which ones you're talking about, but
it could be a mix
It's a
of
last
R1 and
two.
R2.
did that got on there?
This was one of the proposed.
That's the acreage right there.
Yeah, it tells you that they're all half
What's
acre.
it? Yeah.
And they didn't come out exactly like that. This is not the final.
But
What are you looking at? Are you
I
seeing
was
what you're
just-
asking?
I was just looking at the two, there's two concrete slabs that are still not sold. It used to have kind of like the metal structured homes right there that were.
Oh, no, that's a different place.
That's old Jack Mudd's place.
This is, the two you're talking about is owned by a lady who had two duplexes on it down
Oh, that's not this.
Yeah.
That's
there. And
Spring River.
that is,
About River Bend. There, River Bend.
So like if she was ever to sell that, what would be able to go
that's
there?
right here. It's in the pink, it's an R2, so what does an R2 allow?
R2 is manufactured housing. But
It's
here's the
low,
deal.
it's real
So
low.
here's the thing that I definitely would want everybody to understand. So just like in any kind of law, we have our city law, then we have county, then we have state, and then we have federal, right? So federal law is going to supersede state, state's going to supersede city or county, and then on down the line. So FEMA, they are top of it. So if that property, which we all know that it is in the floodway, what that really means is nothing can ever be structurally built there. So it really doesn't matter what zone it's in. We can say, oh yeah, you can put a manufactured house there. Well, guess what? FEMA says you can't put anything there. So then that becomes the final answer.
Okay. I want to just say that I agree with what he was saying about considering smaller sizes for land, because also now you just have to think like with what he was saying with the affordable housing, and what people are able to afford. That's like, I think tiny homes are cool. Tiny homes are like, they're type of, they're not built on the site. They're built someplace else and brought in, like in our community.
Or either way, they can be both.
But in Martindale, would tiny homes be welcome?
I feel like that is also.
In the right places they are.
I feel like that is
They're
also.
spread out within a field.
No,
I'm being
Yeah,
facetious.
I know.
this is all okay, the pink is all okay, all of that is okay for that. It's a 7,800 or 7,300 square foot limit. I mean, hell, that's hardly,
So let me ask you this.
and this darker yellow, which I see none of, right over here, that's all consumed already, so there's not there. But there's room down here if the flood doesn't get you. There's lots of room over here if the flood doesn't
don't
get
get
you. And there's all that up
Flood don't
there.
get you.
Well, that's not too bad
That's
up
not
there.
too
That's on
bad.
West Ridge up
So
there.
here's where the definitions I feel like need to be either defined as in we need to interpret the definitions. So say, first of all, right now the way our ordinance reads is that if you're in R1, it says that you can have one guest house. All right. Well, so say you're in R1 and you want to bring in a guest house. You want a guest house, and it happens to be a tiny house that you purchased and got brought in. So where is the line with, to me, in my past life experience, is that any house that has axles on it, wheels and axles, equals mobile. You can hook up and move it. If the wheels and axles are removed and it is permanently set, then it no longer, there's that line between a mobile home and a modular home. As a matter of fact, the house that is on Northwest River Road, 2 doors down from you, coming this way, that's how that happened. Is because we had already established no mobile homes. And that happened because it is a modular home. Brought in pieces, no wheels and axles. And that's where it gets down into the details. And I think we as a council and commission, we need to...
Or now they're calling like storage rooms, storage sheds, like man caves. Like people are also renting those out as Airbnbs. You're able to do them like that, or she sheds, or stuff like that. But really, they're kind of...
Here's my thoughts. I mean, in this is like if I could have it all my way, which we all know nobody can. But with our short-term rental definition that says if you're in R1, in order to not be considered commercial, which changes your wastewater and solid waste account, you can have 4 or less units. Well, what is the difference between having 4 tiny homes, 4 little 350 square foot, basically all together collectively it's under 1,200 feet, which would, maybe a guest house might be ish, just a guess. Well, I think that's something that we should think about and something that we should, what are your thoughts?
Because you could see it foreseeably being, on the river or something like that, where they just get plopped down and.
Or even not on the river. If you're in Martindale proper, and our requirements are half acre, but say there's a lot of parcels in Martindale proper that are more than an acre, and so where do we draw that with? We don't have it. It's not defined anywhere.
I think it is defined.
Well, then please tell me.
I don't think that, I think you can have a bed and breakfast in a it's permitted for multi-use C1, R4, R3, but if you get into R1, R1A, or R2, you gotta come ask Mother May I with a special use permit. That's what I think it says.
So if somebody wanted to put in 4 tiny houses, you just have to come get a specific use permit.
If you're gonna use them to go rent out, if you're gonna put your kids in them, I don't think you gotta even do that.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if there's a.
There's so many different
Well, let's
variables.
talk about, for example, Airbnbs. I've got that big one next to me,
Oh yeah.
and I had a problem several months ago. There's a bunch of college kids down there.
Do they have a specific use permit?
Well, they have a lot of people in there, and so what happened?
That's not what I'm asking,
They had a lot of people there, and there was kids trespassing on my property, drunk, screaming,
Yep.
yelling, and they ran a rope across the river and trespassing, and basically they're good people. And I called the guy and I said, "Hey, dude, you're not being a good neighbor.
Your guests are having
I
a
said,
problem.
you want to live next to a frat rat facility." So he, on his own, I said, you're okay, you had families in there. He came up with a nuisance and and decibels,
Right.
and he had a very hefty penalty. If the police are called,
Good.
and if it's below a certain decibel and there's complaints, they get fined. Now,
Yeah.
he did that on his own.
Well, and I would love to.
So that's a whole other issue, but I'm saying is, for example, this could be a part of it. We're gonna be, this is a river, and there's gonna be more and more Airbnbs, and I said, you know, people have a right to make money, but again, do we want a bunch of frat rats or college kids coming down there?
No, and that should
Thanks,
be, that's where that specific use
Because
permit.
Austin's had the problem, San Marcos has had the problem, and that could be a potential problem.
So if that property owner were to come to the city, because it is stated in here that they should, come to the city to apply for a specific use permit, they would have to go through the process, which means that all the neighbors within 200 feet of the property would be notified. So all neighbors would be notified that this is going to be an Airbnb or a short-term rental, as we're calling them, kind of across the board. At that point, we have to determine what can we lay down as law, if you will, under the umbrella of short-term rentals. Do we have it
For example, you know what San Marcos does? They're pretty aggressive. You have to live on the property to have an Airbnb. Like Barry lives on the property.
Sure.
She's legal. Our Randy Bunker is legal. They live on the property.
and that keeps a lot of riffraff down, I'm certain.
You know, but again, I'm kind of pushing down the road. Because we're getting more and more Airbnbs. I mean, there's something I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but there's something that we probably need to address as time goes. What do you think, guys?
Hey, Sylvia, let me ask you, the Purswells down there, did they get a special use permit? I don't remember.
We would, P&Z would know about
What's
it.
the address?
That's the Northwest River Road, but it's,
Did my folks, the brick house, they get
No,
special use?
no. See, that's an issue that I've had for a long time, and partly not because I don't want people to do that. Quite frankly, I want people to be able to do that. But what it does when they are required, and I had sent some stuff to Jared one day and felt like we should have a short-term rental roundup, to say, okay, look guys, we know there's a bunch of you out there that are rocking and rolling in this deal, and quite frankly, we're thrilled that you are. It's bringing additional people to our town. It, that helps our economic growth, all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, we need to know it, and your neighbors need to know it. And we have on our books a hotel occupancy tax that is not paid by the owner of the short-term rental. It is paid by the guest of the short-term rental. Just like when you go stay at the Marriott or at Holiday Inn, you pay the city tax. So we are losing on every single short-term rental that is not what I'll call identified and registered. I even told Jared not too long ago, right now I have no intention, and I'll say this for everybody to hear and understand, I have no intention of doing any short-term rental on my property specifically. However, I'm going to go through the process because I want folks to know what it looks like. I want folks to know all of the different elements that are required, and just like when Barry Hamilton came in, she was kind of the trailblazer, if you will, at least in this season. We've had some in years past. But I want other people to not be afraid to come and do that, to know that it's for their protection and for their neighbors' protection as well.
So who's in charge of short-term rentals right now?
Well, nobody's been, quote, in charge of it.
It would fall to me for the administration of it.
I've been bouncing it for a lot of years.
That's where the responsibility would lie. And then it's a matter of enforcing the ordinances as we have them. And to Lisa's point, there's a lot of education that's going to be required to make that happen.
Okay.
And like I said, I feel like if we were to do something like what I've described, a short-term rental roundup where we're, maybe it is for one of the thoughts or notions right now. What are the fees associated with that, Sylvia?
Short-term rental?
Yeah, so if when somebody comes in to apply for a specific use permit,
It's 115.
okay, so maybe if we get, maybe over say the course of say 3 months, we say anybody who applies within this time frame, we'll cut the fee in half. I mean, we still have administrative things that we need to take care of and deal with, but to give some kind of give back we want to reward you for compliance, basically.
I think the rule for compliance is continuing operation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But again, do we want, fortunately that guy was cool,
Absolutely.
but, I had a problem with it and he did the right thing. He got a different clientele. Do we want to, we probably
To me-
address that.
To me, that's one of those things where a person like that, a landowner and short-term rental owner like that, I would love to sit down because that person sounds like they handled it very well and to the benefit of not only his property, but to the benefit of the neighbors and to the safety of the guests that were there. So whatever items he put in place, that could be, put together as these are suggestions.
Another question, do we want to get like San Marcos, and people that have already had them, you got a grandfather there, you can't change that, but do we want in the future, do y'all agree with it? Do we want to do it like Barry? You have to be on the property, therefore, right there, that's a protection for not becoming a frat house or
I think we need to
that's
have
what they do in San Marcos.
So, some of them require, if they don't have somebody on site, to be on-call property manager. So
Something.
even if, they don't live local, they have to have a property
Probably
manager
do
that
that.
can respond to a noise complaint or things.
That probably should be, we probably should
And I
address,
think
I think we should address it. What do you guys, what do you think, Rob? You're on the river, what do you think? Or anyone?
I don't know. I don't think they have to necessarily be on the property, but I
But
do
it has
think
something like that.
you have to have somebody we could get in touch with and say, hey, this is a problem.
And my point is that let's address the identifying factor first. Because we don't know who we're dealing with unless we have identified them and they all have specific use permits.
So could because we've talked about a lot already, and then I think there should be possibly some order to how this is gonna fall and who's gonna, so I've heard about short-term rentals, I've heard about RVs, I've heard about, the land size. So who's gonna be doing all of the research and doing it and then presenting it?
I personally don't feel it's appropriate for me to jump in or deal with the land size. If Jared wants to jump in and address that when
I
we
was
get
just
there.
pointing it out as
I
a
would keep it
consideration.
status quo for now.
So, there's a lot to be considered. I think, Mike and I can dig in and go over and see what other cities are doing in regards to recreational vehicles. I have a ton of research on short-term rentals that we need to sit together and let me show you all the stuff that I've pulled together over the years.
So Mike and Lisa, you're gonna work on RVs and then short-term rentals?
And I personally think that the tiny house thing needs to be addressed, but that to me is more of
The multiple tiny house thing, so
Bigger picture.
at least within the single family detached R1, it's one dwelling and accessory uses and structures, and it lists specific things what those structures are: fences, garages, gates, guardhouses, home occupation, playhouses, antennas, recreation facilities for the use of own residents, keeping of domestic animals, solar energy, and other necessary and customary uses determined by the zoning administrator to be appropriate. So I think in that case, there's enough there that if we're presented with the scenario, the zoning administrator could recommend to the planning and zoning council that it not be approved without granting a variance.
and remember that a variance doesn't mean just permission. A variance means you're not able to meet standards, whatever they are. I think for a lot of years, and I kind of jump on that term, because for a lot of years, I think folks thought, oh, well, I'll just ask for a variance, like it just means if the right person's on the council, they'll let me go through. Well, let's just say, which takes me to the part in our code, which is on my agenda for tonight, the part where it talks specifically about variances. which you do have a copy of. It is chapter 155.042. So to just brief that, a variance is a grant of relief from a specific requirement of this chapter where strict enforcement would result in unnecessary hardship. A Board of Adjustments may grant a variance upon making findings that evidence submitted by the applicant demonstrates that all of the following conditions exist. The variance arises from the condition that is unique to the property in question, where the condition was not created by an action of the property owner, occupant, or applicant. So if you've got a piece of property that doesn't meet the half acre, that's not of your doing. If that was how it was either conveyed or given to you, or you purchased it. The particular physical surrounding shape or topographical condition within the adjacent to the property would result in a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. I'm not going to read all of these.
Number 3, I think would apply though.
Thank you. A request for a variance, this is number 3, is not based exclusively upon a desire of the owner or occupant for increased financial gain from the use of the property or to reduce a personal financial hardship. So all these things have to be considered.
No, they all got to be true.
Correct. Correct. And so getting a variance is not just like because everybody thinks you ought to get it. You literally have to meet all of these requirements, or they have to be in there. And then wraps it up. Variances may be granted only in the following instances, and then it lists the different reasons to vary the minimum building setbacks, to vary the regulations pertaining to required off-street parking or loading, requirements pertaining to the restoration or damage or destroyed non-conforming buildings, having to do with standards for manufactured homes, standards for sexually oriented businesses, and to vary the standards for wireless telecommunication facilities. So, and it goes through the procedure, what the application is supposed to have on it, and I believe that lately we have been updating our applications, which is another administrative task, and making sure that, I know Sylvia and I collectively have updated some of them, making sure that the specific use permit application has all of the things that are lined out in our ordinance that says have to be on there, including the fees, so then the processing, and then also the whole process in which it goes through. So that was one that I wanted to bring to your attention. And because I'm just going to hit on these briefly.
What are the special exceptions? I don't understand that one to say.
Okay, so then let's talk about it. On special exceptions, which is just followed by the variances in chapter 155.043. The purpose of a special exception is to authorize a use that would not be permissible generally or without restriction throughout a zoning district, but which, if controlled as to an area, location, relation to the neighborhood, or other restrictions may be deemed appropriate in each use, would be consistent with the overall intent of this chapter and compatible with surrounding land use and the character of the neighborhood in which the use is proposed. Special exceptions may be granted by the Board of Adjustments, and that I think is also means the commission. Do you agree with that?
I would say it's a city council.
Yeah.
But because, I mean,
We are all one,
It's
so-
all one, so it's,
Maybe one day we'll have the opportunity and we'll grow and we'll be able to have a separate P&Z than the council. So basically, may be granted by the council for development only within the city limits and only for the following: a change from one non-conforming use to another, provided no structural alterations are made, and upon finding that the proposed non-conforming use is not more non-conforming in the district than the previously existing non-conforming use. One thing that makes me...
So I can't do it, but I'm doing it, and that's okay if I get a special exception to do something else that I still can't do.
So here's my thought. Where on our map... No, I
I
have a specific situation that I think may fall into this. So where is the utility, like, is it Verizon or whoever has the telecommunication? Frontier? Where is this on our map?
It is right. Where is
There's Main Street.
What is that? Is that Gonzalez? It is that right there.
Okay.
That last little bit.
All right, so this right here is a prime example. This one little corner right here that is in MU, it was included in MU because it fit. You know, it was a business, even though there's not foot traffic particularly. Right next to it is R1. So say that somewhere along the line, that property with that building is sold. And whoever buys it wants to make that building a house, a living, a dwelling. Because it's in MU, they can. But say
they can.
They can.
Yeah.
Say they tear it down and they want to build something different that doesn't fit. I guess maybe this is not the best one because it's an MU, because MU gives you so many.
Oh, we'll flip it over one more.
Okay.
To Sean's place, right?
Okay.
He's R1, and
That's a good
he
point.
not only owns that lot, which is right up against.
This is going to come to our table, so we need to kind of look at this.
He owns that lot, which is right next to MU. So these four guys over here at Frontier, they could use their back lot all day long for their trucks and their stuff. But because Sean is in an R1 area, he really can't run his business out of there. Okay, and he actually also, I think, owns the very lot right across the street. He's using that as his material lot right now. So literally, the fence is here. It's okay on this side of the fence to do exactly what he's doing, but it's not okay on this side of the fence to do exactly what he's doing. And I think that's where these special exceptions can come in.
I agree.
I don't. If his neighbors don't scream at him about it, what the hell? So, but we would need to go get the paperwork done. That's the piece that I think we're missing on all of this, is that like the Percival's place, I don't remember whether they got one or not, but they may have gotten one.
They did not. It would have come to us.
So then whenever
But it may have. They came in and did something. I mean, when they rebuilt that, they got a permit. And it was a permit because they were building a bed.
But it was not for a short-term
B&B.
rental, because
Yeah,
that would have come to
That-
P&Z.
No. Well, it was for that. I mean, they came in and said that's what they were redoing it for.
Well, that may be what they said they were.
It's been a while.
Anybody that-
Give me the numbers and go look at them.
Anybody that applies for, if they say, I want to do an Airbnb in this space, staff or anybody else needs to know that what that means is that they need to apply if in fact that property is in R1. According to our use table, you have to have there's an S there, you have to have a specific use permit.
Right.
So in order to get a specific use permit, you have to, number one, fill out the application. You have to put up the fee, the money that's involved with it. We have to schedule a public hearing. Letters have to be sent to every property owner within 200 feet of the property. It has to be published in the newspaper. So I'm
Yeah,
going to tell you,
I think I
unless
remember
we
doing
have seen or dealt with that, they don't have one.
Just like the Hamiltons did.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is the process that every single one of them have to go with.
And none of the neighbors complained, because we had that
Correct.
discussion.
Correct. And so that's why I would love to do a short-term rental roundup, so we could do a whole bunch of
That's
them.
when Mary Paul got mad at me, because I was a deciding vote, and I said, well, nobody complained, none of the neighbors complained.
Sure. Why would you
They
hold
did
it?
their
Why would you?
permit, I mean,
And I appreciated that.
so, I mean.
And so that's to me where we would actually save money if we offered a little bit of a discount for those who were going to do it within that time frame. Then we could have one public hearing. We could publish in the newspaper one time, and get as many folks as we could in all at one time.
Could we go back to what you were saying about Sean? So he would have to do the special exceptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that would make his lot commercial?
No,
If
yeah.
it's being used for business?
Or multi-use, I would say. I wouldn't say it was commercial. I'd say we're just extending the multi-use thing.
Yeah, it's just residents,
But that now here's what I want to make sure. That is
And
not.
just like it says in here on the special or some of this, it says, he's not actually changing the structures any. So when he decides, I'm gonna sell my place and leave, it goes back to being a residential. or if he says I'm grown up, my business is doing great, I got to go get a big barn somewhere, and he moves all that stuff out, it all goes back to residential. It sort of that particular issue kind of fits the special exceptions, I think.
Right, but the problem is the way we have our permitted use table and the definition of a mixed use district are separated and incongruent. For mixed use, typically think of it as a semi-urbanized area where you have a shop on the main level and residential units on the top level. It's supposed to be dense housing, and it's even on our description. Accommodate a variety of land uses, retail, office, service, residential uses in close proximity to enable people to live, work, and shop in a single location. Further intended to create central gathering places and encourage economic and social vitality. So when we have single-family detached homes allowed in a mixed use, we're not following our own definition of mixed use. So there's in this case, really what should be there are things like row houses, townhouses, and shops and restaurants and that sort of thing.
Right.
What's difficult is if the use changes. So if somebody here in the Sky Drive area, if they move if the house that they have is demolished or moved, then if we fix this mixed use here to match the description of the district, then you're going to have this issue of almost spot zoning, because how are you going to have a mixed use development on a plot that's that big? And so we need, this one has always been in my mind, never made sense to me, and these things should probably be rezoned if we're going to stick with our mixed use description, and then look for other areas or possibilities for a real mixed use location. One of those here, we have commercial on one half of a property line and residential on another half of the property line that's also near R4. That would make more sense for a mixed use.
And I think, the thought process when these zones were being laid out, like I said, was we had to call it as close to what it was, what it really was. And that's where MU fell in. Now, like you're saying, the other part about it is that here is commercial, but yet, and this is something that I didn't put in and it's really not in what I gave you today, but just to be aware of it, from city limit to city limit on both sides, 300 feet down Highway 80, on both sides, as in 300 feet from the road out, is what we call a scenic corridor, and that's an overlay in our ordinance. And so, even though they're in MU, if these places are torn down or there's any new buildings, they have to meet those scenic corridor requirements.
Yeah, and some of that scenic corridor stuff does not jive with what a mixed use facility would look like.
That part is correct.
And so by putting mixed use within a scenic corridor, again, we have incongruencies here that would need to be resolved in a future update.
Well, that scenic corridor for the big, huge billboards, that's one of that thing was.
Well, the scenic corridor was established. The Dollar General is the prime example, and was the first new building that was built in that space at the time. If you drive up to any Dollar General anywhere else, and you look at the front of it, there's cinder block and mason. I mean, they're just plain, no architectural anything. So the scenic corridor basically said, you can build a new building, but we'd like for it to look like it's been here a long time, like everything else is. And of course, then you have to say, well, what does that really look like? Well, corrugated tin and, pitched roofs. So when you look at the front of the Dollar General, there's a facade.
That's what they do in Fredericksburg.
Correct.
Prime example.
Correct. There's a pitched roof.
Yeah.
There's corrugated tin on that. Even the light fixtures were, they're not your typical box aiming down light fixtures. So the other part has to do with the buffer zone. When you drive down 80, you really kind of don't see the Dollar General. You see the sign, it's not super high. And then right in front of it, because it looks across into, even though it's, I don't know what it's zoned, but there's a residential house across the way. So if you park in the parking lot facing 80, your headlights don't shine directly into the people's houses. So all of that had to do with the development standards. With that, that fell under that scenic corridor. They had to put
And that's also
landscaping.
the big billboards too, I think. I think that's when
That's
Don,
gonna fall into the sign ordinance.
that's in the base in the city, because I know that was a big issue with,
The sign ordinance doesn't matter what the location is, the sign ordinance is in effect throughout the entire city limits, not just within the scenic corridor. So, those were the main highlights that I wanted to bring forth, which had to do with,
So we don't, so I think Jared's right on this. We don't have an allowable use to do what Sean's doing. It's probably not mixed use. It's probably needs to be something else over there.
and he asked.
And I don't think we've got allowable use for Frontier. I don't see anything in there that matches up with what they're doing. And yet we seem to let that go on.
Well, and that was there before it was Verizon.
So you would have thought we would have said, okay, it's there. We want it to stay there, and we would have put a row in there somewhere along the line. So that's another one. So what I've written down is that we need some RVs and maybe a couple of those rows. We need some kind of commercial material storage line in there. We need telecommunication guys line in there so we can leave trails so that people come behind us, understands what the heck we're doing. And then the other thing that if we're about to go do these things, this problem of our process is messed up, I guess, on how you go check this stuff out. I can't fault the Purswells. They came in and asked for a permit. Finally.
But did they ask for a construction permit?
Yeah.
That's to me.
Renovation.
They were doing renovation, and that's all that they came in for, if I remember correctly.
But on
They
the-
had to do nothing with what they were going to be using it for.
But in my
It was just
discussions with them,
renovating the house.
they talked to when I went today, you got to get a permit. He told me what they were planning on using it for. I just
You
didn't
see,
click
and
in
that
my
never
brain
came-
to go that
And
we
that
need to
never
go.
came to mind.
Right. I never told
And
them
that is actually, thank you both for saying that, because that is actually my desired purpose for us having the opportunity to really have this kind of conversation so that we all are aware what the rules are according to the books that we have currently and how there should be triggers. So when somebody comes in for a remodeling or a construction permit because they are doing a full remodel, first it's just a new roof, that would be a different situation. It may be that on our building permit application, it needs to have a line item that says if in fact the use is going to be changed, or just straight out, do you have any intention of having a short-term rental in this property?
And I've done that, and I've been
Told not
told
to.
different.
Well-
And then it turns out to be something else.
And that's when, unfortunately, whomever's in these seats has the ability to make those decisions and changes. But to me, once it gets put on an application, it's there until
probably
somebody tells you to take it
is
off.
to be put on the application and make them write it down and sign it.
And that's a trigger. And so then when it says, say they pay their permit fee for the remodel, but they've checked off that it has the intent of a short-term rental, then the trigger for whomever is in the receiving end of that application says, oh, okay, great. You need this one too. And then we can process this all at the same time. Make it, there's something, that's called just the customer experience and the customer's journey through the entire process. It's my personal opinion that we need to make it as, when I say easy, I'm not talking about not following or not complying, but we need to make it as easy for them to understand and to comply as possible. And that's our responsibility,
We need to
A
go.
council's responsibility?
the city in general,
Yeah.
I feel.
We ought to go talk to San Marcos or somebody and say, how the hell do they do this stuff?
Yeah.
Trigger that. We're trying to reinvent the wheel.
yeah,
here.
exactly, I agree.
They
I've got all
gotta
their
have a
applications.
process.
They're triggered on their
They-
applications.
Yeah, it's probably through the applications, and if we could spend money and get IT services that are out there that kind of automate some of this zoning and building application process that may make it somewhat more efficient. But you still have to be able to wire diagram it out and for it to make sense before you just go out and spend money on it. So
Correct.
we gotta get it right on paper before I think we make an investment on it.
And I have one other thing that I need to make certain that is understood. When you have a specific use permit, and maybe I should look for it where it talks about it specifically. Specific use permits are, say you're granted one, it is for the life that owner who applied and received it, that they own the property. It does not transfer with the property being sold. So if you have a very established, say you've got a very established short-term rental on your property, whether you live on site or not, and you sit and those people have a specific use permit for that use. When that property is sold, the new owners have to apply for it as well.
Would it make some sense to break out that short-term rental as its own permit instead of, I mean, it might fall within satisfy the requirements of specific use in the land use zone, but also have it separated out, that way it's clearly highlighted.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt.
You call it, specific use permits, I have a specific use permit for it might solve that issue, where it's per owner, per person, not per property. And then that way it's considered, you have it, not the
I
property
personally
has
think it ought to be for the life of the property. That's just totally my opinion. Especially if something's already established, but then
it's a business.
It's more of a business registration at that
and then
point.
that's like if
It
you
is.
have a store, like if Walmart was there at Hobby Lobby, and then Hobby Lobby moved in, it would be like saying, somebody else could just come in as Walmart. You know what I mean? It's somebody else's Airbnb or short-term rental.
agreed. I mean, the whole concept and the accounts and all that sort of stuff would not transfer over. But to me, that's almost a sales benefit. If you're selling your property and go, oh, by the way, we've got this. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. I'm not standing up on that.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Devaney. Let's don't invent the wheel. Let's do what other cities do. I mean, just cut and paste. Because we could go on and like RVs or any of that stuff, probably should just follow what the city, or get guidelines from San Marcos, Kyle, or whatever, similar.
Exactly. So, any other questions or items? We've gone over the only thing we didn't go over was the zoning change on the items that I included in your packet. But it's basically it falls in line procedurally with same as the other things. If in fact somebody were to apply for a zoning change, they would have to fill out the application, pay the fee that is listed in the ordinance, and go through the process of the letters being sent to the people that are in 200 feet, as well as a public hearing. And it would be under review by the commission. That was when you were looking at the property that is next to the frontier. That was a question. Should Mr. McDonald, apply for a zoning change for that space?
Well, it's either that or the special, whatever.
Exemption.
Exemption, yeah. I will tell you, the first thing I saw was a variance, and it jumped to mind, but I understand that reading it now.
Yeah.
A special exception is probably what he needs.
Right.
Or variance change. In both cases, you gotta go ask your neighbors, y'all care if I do this, But
In the special
I guess
exemption, is that the case? It still goes to a public hearing procedurally?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what
I
it's
need to be
processing the zoning administrative list using over 200 feet, published notice in the local paper.
Yeah, same process.
Same process.
So all of those are,
The difference is the special exceptions means, okay, you're gonna get to do it, but we're not changing the zone, because when you leave, and you're gonna go back the way it used to be. A zoning change means we change it all the way.
And when
Now,
you
my-
change it
my
all the way, it means
interpretation
maps, it means everything.
of Sean's problem was, I thought, well, you know, if it's okay next door to him in the multi-use, because multi-use allows it, well, let's just extend the multi-use zone. But as Jared pointed out, you know, based on our document, Frontier's not supposed to be over there either.
Exactly.
So that's where we have to just make a decision that, you know, we want to do the least restrictive in the sense of if we do a zoning change, one, you know, you definitely don't want to grant a zoning change when there's nothing around it. You know, the most acceptable situation for a zoning change is when, say, the property has one or two sides or even more sides that is a different zone. You know, so it falls in line, it conforms, if you will. So we just have to decide how to handle or deal with that.
Who was the artist back there, back behind Carlton's place that did that? You know, I don't know that was an art gallery, but he was actually creating art. I don't know whether that's.
But that's an MU. That's MU.
Well, which row is that?
Well, we don't have a
Or would that be considered at-home business?
I think so. And quite frankly, that was what I felt like.
I don't know. I'm just.
That's what I felt like Mr.
What
McConnell
are they-
said.
Because they're doing what they're doing now over there is building cabinetry, right? Is that-
But you can have an MU. You can have a business.
Or would that be?
Maybe Sean's basically just parking equipment, is that what his?
Yes, the real problem was not his house lot, it's the one across
Yeah.
Crocker Street that he's using as a storage yard.
Yeah.
So, anyway, are there any other questions? I really appreciate the input and like we were saying, to wrap it up. So you and I need to put a date on the calendar that we will look at these items and, you know, be it that we communicate via email or actually come sit down and really look at it either way. I'm open for with the RVs, with the short-term rental, and then also the tiny homes.
I disagree. I don't think we can, I think we've assumed that multi-use means you can do anything, and
It's not.
and it's not. I think we're screwing that up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, then I say bring
And
it. I say bring it and let the council make some changes on it.
I think the definition is solid. I think the maps and the application of it is not.
And this is an opportunity. This is a time when all this stuff comes up. I mean,
So you got
to
RVs,
do all of it.
you got telephones, and what's the other one that was there?
Short term.
Commercial material storage and construction
It would be
and
ideal.
manufacturing, all building stuff. If you got to either add a row, or we got to say nope, we really don't want that in there, and so we're not going to allow it. We got to start on a process of telling people they got to move. Okay.
Well, that's not going to happen. Telling people they have to
So when
move.
y'all come back with this, you and Mike are going to go study this and try to make recommendations. Those are some of the ones that we need to go have recommendations on.
So this is one of those situations where, you know, back in between 08 and 11 or 10 or 11, we literally had on every single regular council meeting, we had ordinances and zoning stuff, so that over the course of an entire year where one council was in place, we updated as much as we possibly could. Then at the end of it, then it would all be codified. Then it would all be submitted. Then it would be submitted to the county for the maps to change and things like that. Doing it just a little bit here and there, things get lost and washed away.
But why do we have you as in charge for planning and zoning? If we're gonna do it as a council? And a chairperson also for
Because you
planning
are on
and
the
zoning?
commission. You are part of the planning and zoning commission.
I know that, but I'm working on census stuff too. I'm working on dog ordinances. Like we're all doing, you know, the best that we can. But like, just like it is like a committee or whatever, like if you're gonna be on planning and zoning and Mike is, y'all need to do homework too and come
Absolutely.
already
I think
ready
you
with
have-
reports and, you know, and
You have
stuff and everything.
no idea how much homework I do. My point is that by default, when you're on the council, you're also on the P&Z commission. So we're not saying that you need to go do your homework, but you need to come, obviously you would anyway, to meetings and weigh in on what you think.
Yeah.
We'll do the homework. You just say, I like it
And
or
I
I don't.
thought this was gonna be a rolling review of the ordinances and the way this was, but to me, this was like kind of everywhere.
Well,
We
what
did the
this-
RVs, we did the tiny homes, we did the land, we did the mixed use, and I think I'm more confused now than even when I came in to begin with.
Okay, so basically what started that off was understanding the table, and all of those things that you just discussed were on the table, which is why they got brought up and addressed. And again, my purpose was for us to be able to become more aware. There are things, that I've become aware of based on Jared's interpretation of MU that I don't know that I ever would have really seen. So this kind of conversation, this kind of process has to start somewhere.
So then it's my understanding that, so what are we gonna have at the next city council meeting? What kind of information are we gonna have?
I can't tell you that we're going to have anything at the next city council meeting. But what I can tell you is that Mike and I are going to begin to work specifically on the RV, the short-term rental, and on the tiny house process. To me, correct me if I'm wrong, others, to me that information would then, between he and I, be given to the mayor and to the city administrator. They then would go through the process of saying, he's going to review it and go, you know what, this particular part right here, we don't need to worry about that at all. It's already taken care of. Fantastic. He's going to look at what is written. He's going to implement what we are proposing, and basically as an update to the ordinance. So for example, we might at a specific city council meeting, can't tell you it's the next one, we might look at updating chapter 155.043 in its entirety. He would make whatever recommended adjustments to that, send it to Kent to make sure that it all falls in line.
You gotta be careful with zone. I agree with you. You gotta be careful with zoning because it's one of the key features of a city.
I agree.
And there's a lot of public interest and stake at it. And so if we go through piecemeal, the changes may not be, transparent. And so, and when you have cascading changes like that, it might obfuscate on a large picture, what's happening. It may make sense to have the planning and zoning be a 3-month project, 90-day project to put it together with a presentation, with a recommended new map, and then a public comment kind of thing.
And it just occurred to me, and why I hadn't brought this out before. The way that all of this happened was the ways that I've described previously. However, back in 08 to 11, we hired an outside firm, and all of us know who that was. It was ETR. It was Ed Terrio and Thomas Rhodes. That was what they did. That was the business that they had. They came in. They did all this digging, and they then presented and said, this is what you're doing. I'm not saying that that's what we need to do. I like the notion of, condense it and have a project. What that firm did for us, we didn't have anything like what we do now prior to.
So it was a firm that did it last time.
And
So it
brought
wasn't the
it wasn't
planning
the
and zoning committee.
commission. It was the council that reviewed it. It was the council that reviewed every single thing that they brought
reviewed
forward.
it, but somebody else did all the legwork.
Correct, because quite frankly, unless you have a degree in public administration, you don't necessarily have the understanding of how this all is and all the other factors that are involved.
Yeah, most cities, if of a decent size, they're going to have a planning department where they're going to have people who are accredited through the American Planners Association, and they know this thing inside and out, and they'd be a staff resource to the Planning and Zoning Committee.
And at the end of the day, we all are still just volunteers. So, I mean, I understand, everybody sort of has their niche at the table that.
Well, I'm just used to if it's a committee, I'm just used to coming in. Like if I heard it's going to be a rolling review of the ordinances that are on here, I'm ready to come in and go through this. Okay, this one needs to be this is what, and then with your expertise, because you've done it for so long, listen to recommendations or whatever, and then study. But like this paper, I did these, I mean, I wasn't for sure what we were gonna go over, and I just got it just, you know, when I got here.
Well, I mean, and these are the exact same things that are online. So none of this was new information. This was just me being able to give you something to follow along with. I want to bring forth these kind of what I, call them hot topics, if you will, of things that we actually deal with on a sort of regular basis.
But these, from my understanding, may be changing.
There's no guarantees for that.
But they, okay.
I mean, just see what I wanna do, I'm just gonna cut and paste San Marcos on RVs, I'm gonna go see what they do. I'm no expert.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the city.
Yeah, we have the ordinances in Word document. Just go through track changes and comments.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we got the document here, just need to change it with our RVs and.
Yeah, so there was nothing for you to study, which is why it wasn't any big deal. I just wanted to be able to give you
We don't
something
wanna
to
invent the wheel.
follow along, to read and look at while we're
But
talking.
if there is somebody that we do need to hire or go to an outside firm to make sure that it's done right and correct, then I'm willing to look at that option as well, too, if we need to get somebody to help out with that.
And
There is a cost and a benefit to that. Given the scale of edits that we'd be making, I don't know if the benefits would equal the costs, because we'd be paying a lot for some happy to glad stuff and some sticky decisions. But from on the whole, in the way that zoning code's laid out, it's sufficient to get us to where we need with some edits.
I
We
feel
got an
like
expert right, we got our city manager right here.
I feel like we've got some. When I've talked about some hot topics.
Put it on you, man.
I feel like we've got some things that are on our door that we need to deal with, and I feel like we can do that in house.
The way that a firm would help, they would be able to do the in-depth study on the impacts of current regulations. That half-acre requirement.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah, that's
the
not something
economic
we can touch.
impact of having that requirement? They would have the analytical weight and people to bring to that problem. But if we're not considering that change, then it may not be.
I think it's too early for that.
So then Jesse, but like, I just don't wanna fall into the same boat where like, we've known about Airbnbs.
Yeah.
We have the list of people that are doing Airbnbs. We know what's going on. We keep talking about it, but nothing seems to get done.
And that falls into compliance. And quite frankly, we could change nothing. We could change nothing from this point going forward. One change that we did make recently was changing the term bed and breakfast to short-term rental and implementing that in our deal. If we had nothing more than just that all by itself, for staff, whomever it may be, and to create compliance with what we have already. It's not.
And it's not up to,
It's not my
only
place.
you, yeah.
It's not my place to go knock on somebody's door and
No.
go, oh, by the way, I know this is what you're doing, but you got to do this. But somebody's got to.
Yeah.
And that's why I came up with the notion of, let's do something that makes people be like, oh, wow, this is our opportunity to.
So I
to
think
do this
that'll
in a
be
positive
good for what he was saying, a 3-month project to get that, done, and then like just whatever you think in order of, and I'm down for like, if y'all wanna have a Saturday workshop or whatever, let me know, I'll come in, I'll help out, I do it, whatever I need to do, study, whatever. But yeah, let's do it. I think 3 months is an attainable goal, and so according to.
And does this sort of fall in line with a little bit of the strategic planning that you can gather information?
It would. I mean, they're different purposes. I think it may dovetail nicely if there's something that comes out of that would want to be considered as a possible land use change to incorporate that vision that comes out, then it may dovetail nicely. I think we can address those as they come out, which would be probably in the May timeframe. So in 3 months, that's about the time when we'd have the first, red lines on here's the things we want to change. Then we could look at, see if there's anything that came out of that would also want to be considered. But
Well, I think the things we've talked about tonight in specific, I think we need to address and deal with those.
Yeah, they're not
separate from,
separate. Yes,
because it's already happening, and we need to get a handle on what's already going on. So, if there's no further, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think, we're closer to actually having something happen.
Thank you for allowing me to just, you got it, ramble is your favorite. But, you know what,
Hey,
sometimes nobody knows anything unless somebody lays it
Well, I'm
out.
no expert, so I'll be the first one.
I'm gonna get a shirt that says that.
I'm no expert. I think the Hawaiian shirt says it.
I'm gonna get it that says I'm no expert